Welcome to another Telling It Like Is. My name is Jade Alberts, the founder of Peer Guidance and now new partner and managing partner at NetSource Capital. We'll talk about that in the upcoming weeks, but I want to just start sharing that with people. Sharing knowledge and stories is why I started Telling It Like It is. It is live. If you have any questions, please ask away. If you are watching this after the fact and you have any questions for Connor or myself, you can plop them in there and we will answer them. First of all, I would like to thank a couple sponsors. Startup TNT, their next investment summit is going on right now. They're looking for investors and companies to apply. Highly recommended. A big fan of it, supporter. I was an ambassador and still am an investor in it. Also, the Canadian Blockchain Consortium. We have our blockchain summit coming up October 19th and 20th in Calgary. The links for both of these will be up in a little bit. But you know what? It's time to start talking to Connor. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. The morning isn't going exactly as planned. I've got a sick kid at home, so if I'm running out to grab a kid, you'll know why.
Well, we can do that. I'm sure I could probably find a way to talk while you go grab your partner in crime there and make sure everybody's healthy and doing well. Oh, you still there?
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry,
good,
Jade.
good. Yeah, no, I mean it's. I said we kind of talked a little bit about it before, and all the years behind when I was GoToMeeting before Zoom and all the live streaming events that we had. Everybody was quiet. You didn't want no one to know that you work from home. Now, if your dog barks, kid cries, someone runs in the camera, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Yeah, it's great.
I kind of like it that way. It suits everything perfectly. So what I would like to do is start the conversation off talking about obviously your company. And I mean, I know you've recently raised some cash. You're growing like crazy. Well, we'll get into that a little bit, but please share the story of how you got the idea to start your company.
For sure. So I'll start just with my background. So I'm a mechanical engineer by undergrad. I got hired by Shell in 2008 when last time oil was 120 bucks a barrel. So moved out west, and I spent 12 years at Shell doing engineering for about half that time. Studied an MBA and then moved into commercial roles at Shell. And I had always wanted to start a business. After by the point in 2017 when I had finished my MBA, I realized I had run out of excuses not to start a business. And so I actually just started with a list of ideas, and I ended up finding a business partner. His name's Ben. He's also a mechanical engineer by undergrad. He started his career in alternative energy and then went into facilities design and oil and gas. Spent about a decade doing that. And we got together and we actually just started with a list of ideas. And the list had everything that you could imagine on it. In fact, if Westgen doesn't work out, we're going to go back to importing Japanese toilet seats, which was the runner-up idea. But the idea that started Westgen was really Ben's idea, and it was from an experience that he had in his career. So he had been designing oil and gas well site facilities for upstream oil and gas producers, and one of those producers actually had a fire on their site related to some gas venting through a pneumatic device, and they called him and asked him if he could design them a site that didn't emit methane through these devices. So he set out to do that, but he found that there was a gap in the market in terms of power generation to be able to supply the energy to actuate valves and run pumps without emitting these methane emissions. And he found he wasn't able to find a good solution to that problem for that customer. So then in 2017, when we were working on these ideas, actually it was 2018, the Alberta Energy Regulator announced they were changing the rules. And by 2022, you weren't going to be allowed to emit these emissions anymore. So when that happened, we decided to see if we could find a better way to solve the problem.
I'm always fascinated how something non-related, I mean, obviously the Japanese toilet seat, I'm sure that could be a good idea, but how you figure out how something you're just kind of meandering around doing your job, then all of a sudden boom, here's a brilliant idea. And so how did your partnership come together with Ben having the idea? Did he say, hey Connor, let's go, let's move all in? How did you guys kind of curate that? Was it quick like that, or was it kind of over time, or a little more cautious?
It was iterative, And the first thing about the partnership between Ben and I is the interesting thing is we're actually brothers-in-laws. So I married his sister, and that's how we met. And we ended up figuring out that we had a common interest in starting a business. We did a spreadsheet with a list of ideas. We're both engineers, so of course we did it on a spreadsheet. And we just kind of ranked these ideas based on a few different criteria, such as, where do we see the market growing? What did we ourselves have expertise and credibility in? And so it was a process where we kind of high graded these ideas. We actually had a false start. We initially started a business trying to do some regulatory workflow software, and we ended up putting an end to that when we realized if we achieved our total addressable market, we wouldn't be paying on the salaries of Ben and I, let alone a team. So we parked that after about 6 months, and then this was the next idea that kind of rose to the top.
Oh, so you're on to your third idea then, if you count the first one. No, again, I'm always fascinated how it comes together, and I'm sure there's been no issues. And for any, working with family, and for anybody that wants to, Dan Sullivan was on this show a long time ago, probably about 4.5 years ago, talking about separating the boardroom from the kitchen table type thing when it comes to family businesses. So has it been a relatively easy kind of family business?
It's always complex. What we did before we started the company was we sat down and we opened a bottle of whiskey and said let's make an agreement with each other that we're not going to mess up our families in the name of this business. So we actually wrote down an agreement and we both signed it, and finished the bottle of whiskey that night just to make sure that it was a permanent situation. And we have that. And the idea is if we ever find that we can't resolve our differences, we go back to that contract that we both signed in the beginning.
I love it. I mean, I think it's so important for, having those guidelines set up and for anybody that's listening, I've seen some really good partnerships that go and, kind of grew apart in a good way where somebody, got to a point. I've seen I've sat across from people with awful breakups in businesses and partnerships, which, you never wish for. So it's so awesome that you guys have that. You go back to it, you talk about it, because again, it's so important. I mean, family is so much more important than business.
Absolutely. And we, there are a lot of parallels too in the relationship between family and business. And one of them is that there's always new challenges and the dynamics always changing. And you really have to work on good communication and trust in order to be able to navigate all of that.
No, absolutely. Again, I'm talking with Connor O'Shea, one of the founders of Westgen Technologies. So let's talk about the technology. For anybody that wants to, check into it right now before Connor starts talking about it, you just click on the link in the comment section. But what is your technology, and please share how it works.
For sure. So I'll start by explaining the problem of gas pneumatics, which I referred to earlier. So a pneumatic device, that's a word that a lot of people aren't familiar with, but most people actually do know what they are. A pneumatic device is just a tool that works using a compressed gas to provide the energy. And so an example is the air gun that you use to put the tires on a car in a mechanic's garage or in Formula One. That's a pneumatic device. We call it an air gun. So in oil and gas, we also use pneumatic devices for things like opening and closing control valves and running chemical injection pumps. The challenge historically has been that in oil and gas, often these sites are in the middle of nowhere. There's no access to a power grid. And so we don't actually have access to compressed air. So historically, what the industry has done to overcome this challenge is they use the thing that they do have access to, which is compressed natural gas, because that's what's coming out of the well. The challenge is that compressed natural gas is made up about 90% of it is methane. When you use the gas in the device, it vents off into the atmosphere after it's been used. And methane is a potent greenhouse gas. So it's about 26 times the impact of CO2 over a 100-year period. So it's quite an environmental impact. That's the problem that we were trying to solve. the way we solved it was we needed to figure out a way to be able to provide reliable power to a well site that's in the middle of nowhere and doesn't have access to a power grid. And there were a number of smaller type of devices like thermoelectric generators that just weren't powerful enough to run an air compressor. And then there's large, Caterpillar engines and things like that, but those were just too large for the application, too expensive. So we said, how do we generate power in the middle of that range? We ended up taking inspiration from hybrid cars. And we said, cars can be driven with batteries these days. Why can't we power a well site with batteries? And battery technology's come a long way, and the oil and gas industry hasn't necessarily kept up with that. So we brought in newer battery technology. We developed a solar hybrid system where the batteries are continuously charged by the sun, except not continuously because we're talking about northern Canada. So there's lots of days when there isn't sun. And so we brought in a small gas generator that is capable of running directly on the fuel coming out of the well, not requiring any refined fuels. And that generator is off most of the time. But if the sun isn't keeping up with the power demand, the generator will turn on, it runs at peak efficiency, charges the batteries, and then turns off again. So essentially, we've developed a solar hybrid system to be able to supply compressed air and electricity to these sites in order to eliminate these emissions. Does that explain it, or is there more questions there than answers?
Well, I think that explains it extremely well, and probably too well because I don't have any questions. But no, I'm just kidding. I always have questions. So I think that's really neat. I mean, that's always been the problem with solar, right? Especially when the farther you get north, the less light you have, things along those lines. So I think it's fascinating. So how did you come up with that? Using the excess energy to power a gas generator. I mean, that just couldn't have been something easy to say. Okay, I'm going to go buy a Honda at Home Depot and convert this.
Yeah, that you are right. That is one of the complexities in one of the areas where Westgen holds its IP. And I'm happy to announce we actually were awarded our patent about 3 weeks ago, after 3 years of waiting. So we do have a patent on this technology now. And what we've done, really, some of the challenges come with when you're using the fuel directly from the well.
Yeah.
It's got variability and it's got contaminants because it hasn't been processed or refined yet. And so we needed to develop a system that would be able to handle those challenges at a very low cost, because this was a low cost application relatively. We couldn't use a fuel management system, that would cost $100,000. That wasn't in the cards for this application. That's how the larger generators would solve that problem. What we were able to do was actually, by using the solar hybrid system, we're able to actually just, in a way, ignore the problem. So what we've done is, in the event that the quality of the gas is off and that creates issues with the quality of the power generation from the generator, our system automatically switches back over to battery power. So for a device that's being powered downstream of our unit, it's seeing consistent power, even if the input fuel is inconsistent.
Interesting. I love that. I think that's great. Congrats on your patents. That's awesome. I mean, I know how long the process can be and how much money you can invest in that. So that's great. Kudos to you guys for getting those patents granted.
Thank you.
And I hope you were on a boat one day when you heard that. But I mean, one of the things that I guess kind of irks me always a little bit, and I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, but we never talk about all the great things that we do enough. We're too Canadian that way. We have to go all the way to be American, but we should talk about all the great things that we're doing. So I'm gonna make you brag and talk about and put you on your little soapbox now, talking about your energy evolution and how you are reducing emissions and talk about some what some of maybe your clients that can say. If you can share who they are, great. If not, just some generalizations of why they are loving this.
For sure. So just first maybe on the emissions and what we do with emissions. So a typical application of our unit, before the project is done, a site might emit 1,000 tons of CO2 equivalent per year would be a pretty typical site. That's about 250 cars. When we replace the pneumatic gas with compressed air, and we have some emissions from our internal combustion engine that's in the unit, but very small. And so we actually decrease it to between 5 and 10 tons of CO2 equivalent per year, which is about one car. So we have a 99.5% reduction of emissions when we do these projects. So we're very proud of that, and we're very proud of the total emissions impact we've had as a company, which is now over 100,000 tons of CO2 equivalent per year. And actually, my favorite analogy is the average carbon footprint of a Western person like ourselves is about 20 tons of CO2 per year. And so when you do the math, our units, they eliminate the lifetime carbon footprint of one human per unit per year. So we're really happy that we're having an impact in that way. But more broadly, you referenced the energy evolution, which is what we like to say, because we think that the word energy transition is a bit of a misnomer. Because if you think about the word transition, it implies that we're going from one thing and we're moving to something else. And really, that's not actually the case of what's happening. What's happening is we've got an energy system which is made up of a mix of a bunch of different types of energy sources, and each of those types has a number of characteristics. And in general, that mix reflects the needs and values of society as it has evolved over the last 150 years. What's happening is the needs and values of society are changing, and our energy system is evolving to reflect those new needs and values of society. And so as we move forward, the mix of energy is changing in terms of the proportions we get from the different sources, and also the characteristics of the sources are changing. So we think of that as more of an evolution than a transition. And we think that, evolutions, they need to have catalysts for change. And that's where we see Westgen as being a catalyst, one of many, for the type of change that's required. And so the way we see ourselves is we're a team of problem solvers who has these buckets of expertise in different things like engineering and power generation and carbon policy and manufacturing. And we bring all these competencies together to create the solutions that help drive this evolution and help move specifically the oil and gas industry into the future, to be a source of energy that reflects, the evolving needs of society.
And I love that terminology as well, because I totally agree with you. It's not replacing one with the other. They're all just going to have to work together, probably for our lifetime, our kids' lifetime, and our kids' lifetime. Like it's, maybe eventually in 100 years, one is, maybe oil and gas isn't as high as solar or hydro or whatever it may. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't pick the future, but those numbers that you shared about reducing the carbon and what you do. I mean, kudos to what you guys do. And I'm sure, obviously, people, and it's a great story for your clients to tell, saying, hey, look what we're doing as well.
Absolutely. We've got around 55 oil and gas companies that are clients, as well as we've got some applications in telecoms where we're powering remote cell towers and similarly reducing emissions there relative to diesel generators. So we've now established a wide band of customers all over North America.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. So speaking of that, I mean, you've completed a raise here successfully. Again, kudos to you. And now comes growth and expansion and but basically sprinting. So how do you kind of take your team from, as you said, maybe from what you are now up to 150 employees? What what kind of challenges are you going to see over the next little bit with that? And then maybe share what your future plans are here for Westgen.
For sure. So we moved into the U.S. market last summer, and we caught a lot of traction there very quickly. So we realized prior to that, we were self-funded. We realized quickly that we needed to raise capital. So we did a process, and we did raise $21 million. We closed it in May with our financial and Idea Well Capital partners. And we're super thrilled to be moving forward with those organizations. They're really helping us with that transition. You know, in our, I think, minds, we've gone from startup to scale up, and it's not without challenges. So if I go back a year ago, we were a company of 9 people. Every day we had a morning scrum where every single person in the company would say what they did yesterday and what they're working on today. And now a year later, we're a company closing in on 100 people. And, you know, we've got multiple levels of management. We run a manufacturing facility now. And so there's a lot of complexity and a lot of learning. And every day we learn new things and we get better. And it's a really exciting time to be in this business. It's not for the faint of heart, and it's not for people who don't like change, because there's a lot of uncertainty every day. We live in dog years in terms of our planning cycles.
So I guess a question for you: do you still keep your daily scrums, or do you kind of have maybe your manufacturing scrum, or how do you kind of keep that family like 9-person mentality, or has that gone out the window?
It's I think our culture hasn't gone out the window. We've been very fortunate to have been able
Nice.
to continue to have a really strong culture of this, problem solvers coming, working together, and making a difference. And that's really, I think, why everybody shows up every day with the energy they do, and to a job where you're going to probably work harder than in an established company. But we've got, it has changed. So we don't have scrums with everybody. We still do a weekly scrum with everybody, but it's changed a lot. And one of the things we've done, we use a book called Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. And it's a really informative book that helps you to structure the operating rhythm of an organization, among all kinds of other things you need to be able to do in order to scale past the point where you can talk to everybody every day.
That's a good book. I mean, it's been referenced a few times on this show over the last 5-ish years, and obviously, for good reason.
Yeah, it's kind of our Bible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it's not easy going from 9 to 100 in less than a year. There's been bumps in the road, I'm sure, and people come and go, but you have, you surround. I know you kind of had James come on, Freeman, as a friend of mine and colleague, and invested with them and worked with him. So bringing on people like that to kind of act as an advisor and help you out it only makes your team stronger, and it shows the strength, in my opinion, the strength of your leadership of you and Ben, to say, hey, you know what? Let's bring in people who've been there, then done that we can learn from as well, and then don't have to take their ideas, but you listen to them and kind of grow in your own way.
Yeah, that's been a massive benefit for us to have people like James. James has been incredible in what he's brought to our team, and having raised the funds in May, we've been able to add a few other executive leaders recently, and it's making a world of difference, because it's just magnifying our ability to our bandwidth to do things as a company.
And literally, I mean, I said, this is why I love this show, right? I just got an email, and maybe Percy's watching here, from LinkedIn, a DM saying, hey, I've got some application that just can work in Africa. You gotta connect me with Connor. So this is what we do. This is why we do it. So, hopefully
Awesome.
that you'll expand out there quicker than you thought.
Definitely in the plans.
Exactly. So let's talk about those plans. So where do you see yourself or Westgen in the next, 1 year, 5 years time frame?
There's a couple elements here. The first one is that the market is growing very fast for what we do. So we see a lot of revenue growth year over year, 300 or 400% each year, that we think is completely achievable, and really that we will be limited based on our ability to scale up our operations. That's number one. Number two is you made reference to James. So James has joined us as our Senior Vice President of Digital Strategy. And what we're doing is we're putting together a hardware-enabled software as a service business where we can actually create a bunch of value for our customers using the data that our units generate in kind of two categories. One is increasing the reliability of their site and therefore their production, which is very valuable to them. And number two is creating some transparency and validation around the emissions data that's being generated for them to be able to show the improvements that they're making and really kind of get credit or have people see in a trusted way the progress that the industry is making. So we think that emissions data is really valuable. And then the next piece is, we've addressed pneumatic devices. It's the biggest wedge of the pie in terms of emissions, methane emissions from oil and gas, but there are other wedges. And once we think pneumatic devices is a problem that's going to be solved, and then the next problem is going to have to be solved. And we see ourselves as a team of people that is building the competencies to be able to do that.
No, that's awesome. And as usual, I'm excited to watch and having someone like surrounding yourself with people like James is, only shows how much you guys value other people's opinions and expertise. And I love that. I mean, it's not about, the founders knowing everything. It's surrounding yourself with people that possibly know more than you, that you'll be able to be on that constant learning curve and as well as the founders.
100%.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, and it's I always joke about the boasting and how we have to do things a little more, but it is in the importance and of getting on shows like this, or I don't know if you've been on Tyler's YYC Collisions and then he's awesome and things like that, but making connections even in our own area, like with Percy, and I'll send an email out after to do that, because it is important that things like this that are revolutionary, that can make the changes and reduce our carbon footprint by 99.5 and offer carbon credits and things like that. Moving forward, if we want to look after the earth, we have to come up with new technology. So kudos to you guys for what you've been doing and what you've created. And I'm sure it's only going to grow larger and be better from here.
Thank you, Jade. Yeah, I totally agree. I appreciate that you do this show. I think it adds great value to the community here in Alberta, this startup ecosystem. And I'm just really excited about all the great kind of innovative ideas that are coming out of Alberta right now. I feel like this is the most exciting time that I've seen in this city. And when I came here, we were in the last oil boom in 2008, and it was exciting, but there's just a different energy now and so much innovation happening. And you're part of that community, Jade, bringing that to the forefront and inspiring other people. I think that's super important.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. I figured the show would go on for about 6 months and then nobody would watch it and then it would go away. But it's been fun to, again, share the stories like yourself and all the great. I just love what's going on in this province. There's so many great revolutionary technologies that are going to make the world a better place, and you guys are one of them. So I am pumped to watch where you guys go. And and I'm always sad when these conversations are coming to a conclusion, but I'm going to put a little twist on the last question. So you're probably going to have to change your answer a little bit, because I'm sure you thought about it, once I shared the questions with you. But if you have one piece of advice for a startup or entrepreneur that are going from a startup to a scale up, what would that be?
I think my advice would be find help and don't think that you're going to do it all yourself or that you know the best ways to do things. I think one of our things that has made us successful so far is we've got a vast network of advisors, and we listen and we reflect on what they tell us, and we're transparent in the way we present our challenges to them. We don't hide things or spin the truth about the challenges we're having.
Yeah.
And it's been incredibly valuable, the advice we've been getting along the way. So can't thank people enough for that.
I love that, right? And a phrase I use not only for the mental wellness work I do, but for business is asking for help is not a sign of weakness. And being out there and talking to people, we have such a collaborative ecosystem, and people absolutely will help. It doesn't matter if you're at Founders Coffee and someone has a clothing shop in Cochrane, and you're a big tech company. You know what? You're still like-minded people. They still have something that you might be able to pick up and use. And that is something that I just love about our ecosystem. Everybody, doesn't matter from investors to just regular entrepreneurs, everybody is there to share a helping hand and make sure everybody's successful.
Yeah, that's been our experience, and it's been awesome.
No,
We've been
absolutely. And you know what else has been awesome? This conversation. Like it was long overdue, and kudos to James for making the introduction, for us to kind of have the chat and have a little coffee and be able to get this and kick off our I guess our school year. Summer's usually a little slow. We're all back, all kind of, and this is such a great story to kick off September. And I really thank you for sharing your story and for what you guys are doing in our ecosystem, and all the best in the next little growth period. And again, you need any help, you just reach out.
awesome. Thanks for having us, Jade.
I appreciate it. And again, anybody wants any more information, please click on the Westgen website in the comments section. Startup TNT, if you're looking as a company to do a raise, startuptnt.com is there. And of course, the Blockchain Summit for all you crypto people that are out there. We are bringing some of the leading industry experts over from across Canada, October 19th and 20th here in Calgary. So thank you again, Connor. And I hope everybody enjoyed the show and have a great day. Bye-bye.